We are back to continue our discussion of Governor-elect Dan Malloy's transition and what he'll face as he takes office in January. Joining us now is Keith Fenna from the Connecticut Mirror, and also still here is Christine Stewart from Connecticut News Junkie. She's a reporter. Thanks, both of you, for being here. Keith, we just heard from Colleen Flanagan about how she thinks it might be different with Governor-elect Dan Malloy in office. Tell me what you think will be the difference, how we might notice it as a Democrat in office, but also working on the budget specifically?
In a way, he's going to be able to do almost nothing, and he's going to have an opportunity to do just about everything. I wouldn't count on noticing a lot of great things right away. It's almost like he's driving a bus that's been driven in an alley, nose first, and the sides are creeping in. He's going to have to spend the first year or two just trying to slowly back that thing out. And it's not going to be pleasant to be sitting in the bus while it's all going around. We've been living on borrowed money for the last 2 years. We've been living on gimmicks. If there's been a piggy bank anywhere, we've cracked it open and we left all the IOUs for Dan. And that's what the governor-elect's going to be dealing with.
I just don't think that there is going to be a clash between some of the more liberal caucuses, the House caucus, and a Malloy administration. They're not going to agree on all of the spending cuts or tax increases, and so we are going to see a little bit of some friction there, I think.
Well, and I think that the tax increases in particular, what the public is eyeing and thinking and waiting for and bracing for, I should say. How much of a tax increase should they be preparing for, and how soon?
Well, think of it in these terms. The deficit that we're looking at right now is equal to half of all of the money the state income tax brings in. Brings in about $7 billion, and the deficit's about half of that. Yeah. That doesn't mean we're going to solve it just with tax increases. But despite what you heard during the campaign, the fact of the matter is I bet you about 2/3 of the solution will come from new revenue. And that's going to mean income tax. That's going to mean the sales tax. It's probably going to mean gasoline taxes, just about every place you can find it.
But he was, I think he would argue he was fairly honest about that during his campaigning.
Oh, I think he talked about it. Just he didn't throw out necessarily the numbers.
Yeah.
He certainly never ruled them out. Say, I hope there are not going to be taxes. It's kind of like going out in the rain and say, I hope I'm not going to get wet. But no, he never ruled them out.
Right, and you had written an interesting piece today or yesterday about how the president's tax deal is actually going to help out Governor-elect Malloy.
Well, just imagine if that deal, and I think it will ultimately be signed into law, but let's just say for argument's sake it's not. And people in January start looking at their paychecks and noticing all of a sudden $20, $25, $30 is gone. And then the politicians in Hartford start saying, okay, what can we take? I think it would have made it exponentially more difficult. Fortunately for Governor-elect Malloy, it looks like that's not going to happen.
Well, it's easy to raise an income tax because there's no real constituency for it. There's no lobbyist up there that lobbies just against the income tax. So you're not going to see, there might be a little bit of a public outcry. Obviously, there was when Weicker first created the income tax. But I think that may be, a little bit of an easier solution for them.
So how soon do you think Ben Barnes is going to become vilified?
My suspicion is it won't be Ben as much as it will be Governor-elect Malloy. I do think he is going to definitely, as Colleen said in the prior segment, he's going to be very engaged. I don't think you're going to see him hiding behind much. Some people, when Ben Barnes was appointed budget director, said, okay, we don't have a former legislator serving. He's a budget official from the city of Bridgeport. We need somebody who's going to do the political negotiating. Dan Malloy's going to do the political negotiating. He's going to be out front.
Do you think, his commitment and his visits to D.C. Will make a big difference?
Well, he came back. He came back the other day, and he told the House Democratic Caucus, "Don't expect any money from D.C. The solution to the problem is going to have to be homegrown because there's nothing coming out of D.C. right now."
Right. What do you think his working relationship will be with the Republicans here in the state?
Well, one of his first acts was to walk into, the Republican caucus and introduce himself and invite himself to the table and say, I want to work with you. So I think that he will have a working relationship with the Republican caucus. maybe more so than Governor Rell did. Governor Rell was often at odds with the Republican caucus.
And he has been very vocal, particularly in the last couple of days, right, criticizing Governor Rell, and particularly the way that the Republicans in her administration dealt with the deficit or kind of, I guess he would say, did not deal with it.
Well, one problem he will face with the Republicans, they're in the minority, so they have the luxury of voting no on everything. Mm-hmm. And I think when it comes to taxes, the Republicans can say, we're going to vote against this, we're going to vote against that, and they won't really have to offer an alternative. In that place, I think Governor Malloy will have a spring-long fight with the Republicans.
Well, and I think that that's what people are concerned about, isn't it? Is that, he can say that he's going to do all of this with taxes, but that when it comes down to it, the Republicans are going to be able to hold him off.
Well, and you also have a group of moderate Democrats,
yeah.
Who either come from the wealthy part of Fairfield County
right.
or come from other wealthier communities who don't want to see the income tax raised. So there is a group of Democrats, and they don't have the veto override anymore. They only have 100 in the House and 23 in the Senate. So there's no power to override the governor on any of that.
I wanted to ask both of you about a release that his people put out today about regarding the deal that President Obama made with the tax cuts. And he said there's no such thing as a perfect piece of legislation, but the framework of this package is something that he supports. And then he said there's a legitimate role for the House of Representatives to play in this process. Was he calling out Congressman Larson, or...
I think it was more he was kind of hedging his bets. I think his concern is, I'm glad the deal's going through so that I can talk to people about raising taxes, not while their federal taxes are going up. But the other side is they can say, well, gee, President Obama's not raising our taxes.
Right.
Why are you?
Right. I mean, and that's a legitimate question, isn't it?
Well, the federal government can print money. The state of Connecticut cannot. He's got Governor Malloy is going to have a constitutional requirement to produce a balanced budget. Washington doesn't know what a balanced budget is.
Right. It's just to me that it seemed kind of discordant when he says he's going to spend so much time in D.C. and he's going to create this relationship with, our congressional representatives, and then I don't know, he kind of critiqued them.
Well, the congressional representatives don't always get along or agree with each other too. So it's not one unified caucus, even though they are Democrats.
Right. That's true. Well, it's nonetheless going to be very interesting, and I'm sure very complicated. And we appreciate both of you for covering it throughout the year. Thanks so much for being here. Don't forget, if you missed something here on The Real Story, you can now watch it online by going to ctnow.com. You can also catch us on YouTube. Thanks for watching this week's edition of The Real Story. We'll see you here again next week.